They say betrayal feels like a stab in the back, but for me, it was quieter, colder. It looked like a standard bank notification. It sounded like silence, and it left a $13,000 crater in the middle of my Saturday morning. The moment I noticed the missing $13,000, I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Sunlight hit the chipped corner of my kitchen counter, casting that usual gold band across my checkered linoleum floor. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday. Tax season had just ended, and I'd finally slept past 6 a.m. I opened my banking app out of habit more than anything. But that number, I stared at it, blinking like maybe I'd read it wrong. I hadn't. 2 withdrawals. One for $8,000, one for $5,000. Same day, same damn hour. I sat there, the mug warming my hands, heart thudding slower than it should have. Cold spread across my chest. Not panic, not yet. Just that first dry breath you take when something clicks into place and you really don't want it to. I checked the routing details. It was my sister's name, Rachel. And the account? Their joint one. Hers and her husband Travis's. No memo. Just gone. I didn't move for 10 minutes, because this wasn't the first time. There were smaller things. $200 here for a car emergency. $600 last Christmas for the kids' gifts. $3,000 2 years ago when their roof caved in. I'd paid for their washer, contributed to their Vegas elopement, that they somehow turned into a 5-day resort vacation. Even helped them with closing costs on that fixer-upper house they never bothered fixing. And I'd never said no, not once. You're just so solid, Aaron, my mom always said. You're the dependable one. It used to make me feel proud, needed, like I was the backbone of something. Now it made me feel hollow. That phrase came back to me as I stared at the balance. You're the dependable one. I used to think it was a compliment. Now I understood it was a job title, one I'd never applied for. I went into my spreadsheet, pulled up the records. I keep track of everything. I'm a CPA. It's what I do. Over the past 6 years, I'd sent my sister and her husband over $38,000. That didn't count what I covered during family holidays, or the Disney trip I paid for, just to see the kids smile. Travis always said he'd pay me back once his business took off. It never did. By noon, I was still in the same clothes, still in that chair, staring at the screen like the money might reappear if I blinked enough. I called the bank, confirmed the transfers were authenticated using the shared account access I'd stupidly left open after helping Rachel set it up years ago. My hands didn't shake. I just unplugged. Went through the motions of a man who's seen this movie before but didn't expect the sequel. Later that day I called Rachel. Her voice was bright. Too bright. I asked about the money. There was a pause, then a defensive laugh. Oh, come on, Aaron. It's not like it's a big deal. We needed help and you always help. That's what family's for. I didn't say anything. She added, You can't seriously be mad. I mean, we all pitch in when someone needs it, right? We all? I asked quietly. She didn't respond. The worst part wasn't even the theft. It was that tone, like I was being dramatic, like I was breaking some unspoken contract by expecting basic respect. That night, Mom called. Said Rachel had told her I was upset about some money stuff. Sweetheart, she said, using the voice she reserved for news about bad weather. You've always been so reliable. Can't you just let this go? I didn't sleep. I kept hearing that sentence over and over. Not Rachel's theft, not even Travis's freeloading, but my mother asking me to let it go. As if the loss wasn't real. As if boundaries made me the villain. It felt like betrayal had roots in the soil I was raised in. Monday morning, I stood in line at the bank with a printed document in hand. Statement of fraudulent withdrawal. I didn't flinch when they asked if I wanted to pursue legal action. I said yes. There were 4 people ahead of me. One of them had a toddler who kept dropping a juice box. The floor smelled faintly like disinfectant and cold metal, but I felt, still, for the first time in years, I wasn't the dependable one. I was just a man reclaiming his name. And God help me, it felt like freedom. The first person to call me after I filed the fraud report wasn't Rachel. It was Mom. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask what happened. She just sighed like she was bracing for a storm and said, Honey, we need to talk. Privately, I already knew what was coming. She showed up that evening, still in her nurse's scrubs. Holding a casserole like that made it a family meeting and not an ambush. She didn't even sit before launching in. Your sister's been crying all day, she said, setting the dish on my counter without asking. She said you're threatening legal action. Against your own blood. I leaned back against the kitchen table, arms crossed. She stole 13 grand, Mom. She winced, like I'd said something obscene. It wasn't stealing, it was borrowing. Rachel told me it was for something urgent, something Travis needed for the house. The same house I helped them with 3 years ago? She said they'd pay you back. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence thicken, the kind that makes people either confess or get defensive. She did neither. She just looked tired. Why is it always me? I asked quietly. Why is it always me who fixes things, pays things, covers for the messes? She blinked, caught off guard. Because you're stable. Because we can count on you. No, Mom. You depend on me, but you don't respect me. There's a difference. Her mouth opened, closed. I saw the flicker of hurt, but it didn't stop her. This could ruin her, she whispered. Travis's credit is already shot. If you push this, they could lose the house. They used my account, I said. Without permission. That's a crime. She stepped closer, voice lower. Aaron, you're going to destroy the family over money? That line hit like a slap. I walked past her, opened the fridge just to do something with my hands. It's not about money. It's about boundaries. about how none of you have any when it comes to me. Behind me, I heard her sit down finally. Your father always said you were too rigid, too black and white. He also said I was the only one who finished what I started. She didn't respond to that. Later that night, I got a text from Travis. Didn't think you'd actually go through with it. Guess we know where you stand now. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I spent the next few days in a strange state of detachment, working, eating, sleeping like a machine. I closed the joint access Rachel had used, moved my savings to another bank, added fraud alerts to all my accounts. It felt like building a fence after the horses were already gone, but I needed the illusion of control. What broke me wasn't the theft. It was what happened Thursday night, a family dinner. Mom insisted, said it was time we talked civilly, that Rachel wanted to apologize. I went. God help me, I went. The table was set like nothing had happened. Roast, salad, 2 kinds of pie. Rachel didn't look up when I walked in. Travis gave me a nod, then went back to his phone. We sat. We ate. And 20 minutes in, Mom lifted her glass and said, "Can we all just agree that what happened was a misunderstanding?" I put down my fork. "No." Rachel finally looked at me then. "Aaron, seriously? You're still mad?" "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm done." That silenced the table. I stood, placed my napkin down, pulled a manila envelope from my coat pocket, and set it in front of Rachel. "The bank needed documentation. Just letting you know what's coming." Travis muttered something under his breath. Rachel pushed back from the table, face reddening. "You're choosing paperwork over your own sister?" I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time felt nothing. No guilt, no panic, just clarity. "I'm choosing me." I left before anyone could follow. The cold air outside felt cleaner than it had in weeks. For years, I thought being dependable meant being good, being loved, being safe. But maybe being dependable just made me a target. And now? Now I was finally stepping out of the crosshairs. They didn't wait long to escalate. By Monday morning, I'd received 2 voicemails from my uncle, a Facebook message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, and a group text titled, "Family Support System," as if branding emotional blackmail made it noble. "Aaron, I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding. Your sister's been under a lot of pressure lately. No need to ruin lives over a bank error." A bank error. Rachel had taken the money deliberately, from my personal savings account she never should have had access to in the first place, and they were calling it a bank error. As if Wells Fargo had tripped on a rug and accidentally handed her 13 grand. The only one who didn't reach out was my father. He's been silent since the funeral 2 years ago. Alive, just emotionally extinct. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was how calm I felt through it all. I'd always thought standing up for myself would feel like confrontation, but it didn't. It felt like stepping into a room where the noise finally stopped. That changed Tuesday night. Mom showed up again. No warning. Just a knock on my apartment door, casserole in hand like she was casting a spell that would undo everything. She looked smaller this time, tired in a way that went beyond the shift work and the worrying, like life had finally knocked the wind out of her, and she hadn't figured out how to breathe again. "I came alone," she said, and I let her in, out of habit. Out of that last thread of guilt they hadn't cut yet. We sat in silence for a while. She didn't touch the coffee I poured, just looked around the apartment like it had betrayed her by not being a wreck. Then she said it. "You know, your sister thinks you hate her." I didn't answer. "She said you were always the favorite, that we expected so much from you because you were capable, and from her, we just wanted her to survive." I didn't want to hear it, not because it wasn't true, but because it was. "She made a mistake," Mom added. "People do that." "You've made mistakes too." "Yeah," I said quietly. One of them was trusting her. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the person sitting in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe neither of us did. "I just want the family whole again," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but you don't build a whole family by breaking one person to pieces." She left the casserole on the counter. I threw it out the next morning. That was the same day I got the email from the bank confirming the fraud investigation was officially underway. Attached was a copy of the complaint. My name, her name, the amount, $13,000. Cold, legal, indisputable. That night I opened a new spreadsheet. This one wasn't for taxes or budgets or retirement. It was a list of every favor, every transaction. Every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. Maybe nothing. But I needed to see it. I needed proof that I hadn't imagined the weight I'd carried all these years. And as I typed, one line stuck out more than the rest. April 2019, covered Travis's dental surgery, $2,400. Mom's words, "You're always so reliable, sweetheart." Reliable. I stared at that word for a long time. Then I did something I'd never done before. I deleted it. The first court notice arrived on a Wednesday. Thin envelope. No fanfare. Just a printed date, a docket number, and the cold reminder that, yes, this was really happening. I left it unopened on my desk for hours. Not because I was unsure, but because seeing it there, untouched, gave me the illusion of still having control over something that had long ago spun out of my hands. That night, Rachel called. First time in months she used her own number. I almost didn't pick up. Almost. Her voice was brittle, like she'd rehearsed being calm, but the cracks kept showing. "We need to talk, Aaron. Please." I didn't say anything. She kept going. "You know I wouldn't have done this if we weren't desperate. Travis lost 2 jobs. The mortgage. The kids needed school supplies. You needed an excuse," I said flatly. "And you're still trying to sell me one." She got quiet. I could hear a television in the background, a kid laughing, a faucet running, the white noise of a life built on my silence. Then softly, like it was supposed to disarm me, "You always said you'd be there for us." "No," I corrected. "You said that. I never agreed." Silence again. Then the pivot I expected. "If you go through with this, Mom says she won't be able to show her face at church." There it was, the family shame card. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it was. "Tell Mom she should have thought of that before choosing PR over her son." Her voice hardened. "You're really going to make your nieces suffer over a technicality?" That was the moment I felt the switch flip. I stood up from my desk, paced to the window. "You know what's worse than losing $13,000? I asked. "Realizing the people you love see you as an ATM with a pulse." She tried to say something, but I didn't let her. "You had a key to my life, and instead of knocking, you ransacked the place and called it help." Click. I hung up, blocked her number. 15 minutes later, Travis texted me from a different number. "You're really something, man. Cold. Hope your money keeps you warm when you're alone." I deleted it without reading the rest. That weekend I went to a notary, signed paperwork, cleaned up documents, forwarded everything to my lawyer. I declined family invites, ignored passive-aggressive voicemails, and spent a full day deep cleaning my apartment. Every corner, every drawer. Not out of stress, out of clarity. Because here's the thing about boundaries. Once you draw one, the people who benefited from your lack of them will do anything to make you feel like the villain. But I wasn't the villain. I was just finally refusing to play the victim. And for the first time in years, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. I didn't expect the smear campaign, but I should have. It started with a Facebook post from Rachel. A long, teary-eyed rant about being betrayed by the one person we thought we could count on. No names, just enough breadcrumbs. I saw it because a coworker, who barely knew anything about my personal life, walked into the break room and asked if everything was okay. I read the post twice. She called me someone close to us who always pretended to care, and said she'd been blindsided by legal threats instead of compassion. She included a photo of her daughters, smiling, unaware, with the caption, "Doing it all for them, no matter who walks away." The comments were predictable. Some people only care when it benefits them. Family means nothing to some folks. "Stay strong, Mama. Karma comes around." No one knew what actually happened, because I hadn't said a word. That night, Mom called again, this time crying. She said Rachel was devastated, that she felt humiliated, that the girls were asking why Uncle Aaron doesn't visit anymore. "She's hurting, sweetheart," Mom said. "We all are. This is tearing the family apart." "No," I said. "This is exposing what was already broken." She didn't respond, just sobbed quietly on the other end until I told her I had to go. I stayed off social media for the next few days. Turned off notifications. I focused on work, on routines, on walking a little longer every morning before sitting down to the numbers and spreadsheets that never judged me. But it still gnawed at me, the half-truths, the sympathy she was harvesting. By the weekend, someone had messaged my employer's public account anonymously, accusing me of emotional abuse toward family and questioning whether someone that cold should be handling sensitive client data. My boss called me in. He was sympathetic, said he believed me, but still, it stung. My integrity was the one thing I had left untouched. I sat in my car afterward for nearly an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. This is what happens when you stop playing your assigned role. You get cast as the villain in someone else's redemption arc. That night, I did something I hadn't planned. I wrote my own post. Short. No drama. No attacks. Just truth. In response to what's being said, I didn't walk away from my family. I set a boundary. I didn't betray anyone. I protected myself. I didn't choose money over blood. I chose respect over exploitation. I will not apologize for that. I left comments off, logged out, slept for 10 hours. When I checked back the next day, it had been shared nearly 50 times. A few messages trickled in, mostly quiet support. A few apologies from distant relatives who said they'd heard only one side. Nothing dramatic. But the noise had shifted. Rachel's posts stopped. Mom didn't call. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could exhale without bracing for guilt. I knew this wasn't over. But I also knew something else now. I was no longer afraid of being the bad guy in someone else's story. It was late April when I saw her again. In person, I mean. Rachel. I was coming out of the grocery store, arms full of weekend essentials. Coffee, frozen meals, a loaf of bread I didn't need but bought out of habit, when I heard someone call my name. She stood by the cart return, eyes red, hair pulled into a bun like she hadn't expected to leave the house. For a second, we both just stood there, as if unsure whether to acknowledge the moment or pretend it wasn't happening. "Aaron," she said again, softer this time. "Please." I thought about walking past her. I didn't. We sat in my car for 15 minutes. No air conditioning, windows cracked, plastic bags rustling in the back seat. She didn't cry. Not really. She just looked undone. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," she said. "You already said that," I replied, not unkindly. She flinched, nodded. "I know." What followed was a strange kind of confession, part apology, part justification. She said they'd fallen behind on bills, that she'd begged Travis not to touch the account, but he said it'd be fine, that I wouldn't notice or I'd forgive them like always. "And I let him do it," she said, "because I didn't want another fight. I just wanted things to be quiet for once." That hit harder than I expected. I remembered our childhood, how she'd hide in the linen closet during our parents' screaming matches, or sneak snacks into my room because It was less tense in here. She was always the one trying to smooth things over, even when she didn't know how. She was trying to do it again now. I'm not asking you to drop anything, she added quickly. I know it's too far for that. I just wanted you to know I get it. I see it now. I looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't the enemy. Not truly. She was a person who'd learned, like I had, that survival sometimes meant taking from those who never said no. But I wasn't a no man anymore. I believe you, I said, and I still need that money back. She nodded. I'll make it happen, she whispered, even if it takes years. I didn't say thank you. It wasn't a favor, but I did nod. As she stepped out of the car, she paused. Mom says you've changed, that you're colder now. I'm not colder, I said. I'm done being convenient. She didn't argue. She just shut the door behind her and walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd of parked cars, feeling neither triumphant nor bitter, just steady, like something had finally settled inside me. Not closure, but clarity. The formal mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday. Neutral territory, neutral walls, neutral coffee, everything designed to feel fair. But fairness wasn't what brought me there. I wasn't interested in compromise. I was interested in conclusion. Rachel showed up with a legal aid rep. No lawyer, just someone from a free clinic who looked exhausted before we even started. I brought my attorney, not because I wanted a show of force, but because I'd learned that being polite didn't protect you. Documentation did. The mediator was cordial, efficient. She asked if we'd be willing to engage in restorative dialogue. I said no. The truth didn't need to be restored. It just needed to be recorded. Rachel didn't speak much. She mostly nodded, signed what was handed to her, avoided eye contact. When she did speak, it was in clipped phrases. I understand. I acknowledge. I'll comply. It wasn't performative. It was resigned. Afterwards, as we stood in the lobby waiting for separate elevators, she finally turned to me. I didn't fight this, she said, because I knew if I did, I'd only prove your point. I looked at her for a moment, then said, You did that the moment you touched the money. She nodded once, then looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly. I'm trying, Aaron, she added. I've started working nights. I sold a few things. I've got a plan. It wasn't for my benefit. It was for her dignity. Good, I said. I didn't owe her encouragement. She didn't ask for any. After that day, things grew quieter. The texts stopped. No more late-night voicemails from Mom. No more cryptic family posts. It was like someone had finally cut the power to a flickering house. Nothing but silence and darkness. But for once, I wasn't afraid of either. Instead, I started to notice things. Like how much easier it was to breathe on weekends. How I no longer checked my phone compulsively before opening my banking app. How my apartment felt less like a bunker and more like a home. I even started sketching again. Just rough lines in a notebook while the coffee brewed. Things I hadn't done since college, back when my time belonged to me. One morning a letter came, handwritten, from Rachel. Inside was a copy of her first repayment. A small amount, but real. There was no apology this time. Just 5 words scribbled beneath the check stub. I know this doesn't fix it. And for the first time since it all began, I believed her. It was a Sunday afternoon when Mom called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then another, and another. By the 4th, I figured someone had died or she was escalating. Either way, I needed to know which. I put the phone on speaker and listened while folding laundry. Her voice was calmer than I expected. Hi, sweetheart. I know you probably won't call back, but I wanted to say something. Rachel told me about the mediation and the repayment. I know it doesn't change how things happened. But I've been thinking about you, about how we treated you. That made me stop folding. I always told myself we leaned on you because you could take it, because you were strong. But maybe it was just easier to use the person who never fought back. A long pause. I'm sorry for making that your role. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a while, socks in one hand, the air around me thick with something I couldn't name. Regret? Relief? Or maybe it was just the absence of resistance. For the first time, no one was pushing back, minimizing, reframing. It didn't make me want to forgive her, not yet, but it did make me want to breathe. That week I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned a solo weekend trip, a cabin north of Tahoe tucked near a quiet lake. No family, no service, no obligations. Just me. At check-in, the clerk handed me a key and said, If you're looking for peace, this is it. I believed her. The cabin was modest. Stone fireplace, creaky floorboards, the smell of pine and something older, like time. I unpacked slowly. No rush, no notifications, just the sound of my own presence. On the second morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stepped outside barefoot onto the dewy porch. The lake was still, the sky a soft blue bruise before sunrise. I stood there, cup in hand, and thought about everything I'd let happen to me in the name of being the reliable one. The debt, the guilt, the erasure. I realized something then. They never asked if I wanted that role. They just handed me the weight and smiled when I carried it. But I'd finally set it down, not to spite them, but to save myself. That morning, I opened a fresh page in my notebook. No columns, no formulas, just ink and space. And I wrote, I don't owe anyone my silence. The words weren't for them, they were for me. Coming back from the lake felt different this time. No dread, no bracing for missed calls, no emotional hangover waiting in my inbox. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the world hadn't collapsed while I was away, and that if it had, it wasn't my job to fix it. The next day, I met with my lawyer one final time to review the signed repayment agreement. Rachel had submitted her second payment. Still small, still symbolic. But this time it came with a time-stamped bank transfer and not a handwritten check. Progress. We closed the file. My lawyer shook my hand and said, "Most people never follow through this far." I just nodded. I wasn't most people anymore. On the way home, I passed the elementary school near Rachel's neighborhood, the same one I'd helped fund a library drive for years ago. I remembered the night she called me asking if I could just cover the gap, because the PTA was falling short and Travis had a rough quarter. I'd sent the money without a second thought. I hadn't walked near that school since all this started. Now, I stopped, got out, just stood across the street and watched a class of kids line up for recess. Laughter, backpacks. Someone had drawn chalk stars on the sidewalk. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel pride. I just felt distance, and it was good. That night, I got a text from my cousin Ellie. We hadn't spoken in years. "Hey, just wanted to say, I saw your post a while back. Been thinking about it a lot. Our family does that too. You're not wrong. Just that. Validation. Quiet and clean." A few days later, a package arrived at my door. No return label. Inside was a small framed photo. Me and Rachel as kids, sitting on the porch, popsicles in hand. Taped to the back was a note. "For what it's worth, I do remember when we were good to each other." There was no name. Did I forgive her in that moment? No, not exactly. But I placed the frame on a shelf, not as a gesture, just as a reminder that once there was love here. And once there could have been something better. But that's the thing about trust. Once it's broken, healing doesn't mean returning to the way things were. It means learning to build something stronger with what's left, or walking away from the wreckage and finally learning to live lighter. I chose lighter, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for that. The final payment came on a Thursday. It wasn't the money that caught me off guard. It was the memo Rachel attached to the transfer. Cleared. I know it's late. Thank you anyway. No drama, no apology, just finality. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, waiting to feel something big. Relief, maybe. Closure. Vindication. But what I felt was quieter, like dust settling after a long storm. I closed the banking app, leaned back in my chair, and looked around my apartment. It was clean, uncomplicated. The silence no longer felt like a void I had to fill. It felt earned. I spent the weekend repainting the hallway. Something about the scuffed white had started to feel too much like who I used to be. Unnoticed, always functional. I chose slate blue. Subtle, but firm. Like me now. Saturday night, I got a text from Mom. No pressure. Just wanted to say we're having dinner tomorrow if you feel like dropping by. Door's always open. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it. Let it breathe. Then, after a long moment, I typed, "I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not ready for that yet." No anger. No explanation. Just a boundary. She replied an hour later. "Understood." That was it. No guilt trip. No tears. Just space. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it might stay that way. The next morning, I took a walk before sunrise. Same route I used to take when I was buried in work and obligation, trying to outpace the exhaustion of being everything for everyone. This time, I wasn't running. I paused at a bench near the park, took out my phone, opened my notes, and wrote, "My family didn't fall apart because I said no. It was already fractured. Saying no just revealed where the cracks had always been." Then I closed the app and sat still, letting the quiet stretch around me. No one needed anything. Nothing was being asked. And in that stillness, I felt it. Not anger, not sorrow, but something cleaner. Something I hadn't known I'd been missing. Control. Peace. Myself. And finally I realized I wasn't the dependable one anymore. I was the free one.